I think you're right. We have to teach skills and we have to teach knowledge. But I think one of the other things, the profound things that happens during graduate medical education training is professional development.
Well, welcome to The Developing Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Reinking, pediatric cardiologist, physician development coach, and this is the place where we bring the heart and soul back to medicine. Thank you so much for joining us again. I am so excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Amy Stier. I've known Amy since I think we were both baby doctors, right? So I believe that I was a fellow when you were like a an intern when we were working together, right?
I think it was, I was either an M3 or an M4 because you were crucial in making me fall in love with pediatrics. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, well, I want to tell you just a little bit about Amy, and then we'll have her tell her origin story in her own words. But so Amy's a clinical professor of pediatrics and the vice chair of education in the Stead Family Department of Pediatrics at the University of Iowa. She was also recently named associate dean for graduate medical education. And for those of you who don't know about GME, that is a huge job. And she's the designated institutional officer, I believe, for the Carver College of Medicine. So in that role, she oversees the Office of Graduate Medical Education and really shapes the training programs and educational environments for the residents and fellows who are early in their career and becoming independent physicians. What I'm really impressed about looking at Amy's career, she's really been a leader since the moment I knew her. So she started out as a chief resident in pediatrics, and then over, it's hard to say, but probably 2 decades of experience, which neither of us is that old who have been
No.
working for 2 decades, but she's led the residency program and developed institution-wide curricular initiatives like GME Transitions Project and the Trust Curriculum. In addition to her MD, she holds a master's in medical education and really is just a leader in pediatrics and education, and we're going to learn a lot from her today. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I am thrilled to be here and so excited about the good stuff you're doing with this podcast and with your work as well.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to just start kind of as I mentioned, and what's your origin story? What drew you to medicine and what drew you to medical education?
So I've reflected on that for a long time, and I don't know that I have anything, sort of one thing that said, yep, this is where I'm going to go. I sort of tried a whole bunch of things and kept trying new things and sort of stepping off the ledge with things I didn't know about to try them.
Okay.
So there are no doctors in my family, and really nobody who does anything in the healthcare field either. I really liked science, and I really did a ton of service when I was in high school and in college. And that led me over time to realize that the lab wasn't where I was going to do my best work
Mm-hmm.
as somebody who really liked science. And so I had studied abroad in London my junior year of college, where I didn't take any science classes. And I needed to decide what I was going to do. And at that point, I just decided I'm going to take the leap and see if this is the right fit for me. I'm really so glad I did. There was a lot I didn't know about medical training. And I think if I had known more about some of the things that are involved in becoming a physician, the long hours, the sacrifices you make, the heartache that sometimes happens as we lose patients or get engaged with a variety of the different challenges. I don't know that I would have done it, but I think it was absolutely the best fit. And I feel so lucky. I feel like I have literally the perfect job.
Hmm.
Medical education was a little bit different path. I was a resident and working hard, and pediatrics was a good fit for me. I knew I wanted to do something medical rather than surgical. I didn't like the OR as much. And the patients in pediatrics were great. I really fell in love with the patient populations of women and kids. And so I considered OB, but I didn't want to be in the OR. And so in general pediatrics, which is where I am, I get to work with kids, of course, and the medical decision making and the variety that you get in pediatrics, from the tiniest babies to young adults and teens, is really fun for me. But I also get to work with a lot of women.
Hmm.
Pediatrics has a lot of women in it, so I get to work with some of the smartest women in the world.
Yeah.
And I also get to work with moms. And over time in my career, I've found that this idea of empowering people to make their lives better, to feel better about their job as a parent, to feel better and more empowered in their role as a physician is really rewarding for me. as you mentioned, I was a chief resident right after my peds residency here at Iowa. And in that year, I thought it would be a lot about teaching, sort of face to face teaching. And it was.
Mhm.
But I also saw the administrative side of it. And I think that's where maybe the rest of my career trajectory sort of started.
Mhm.
Is in that role, you're sort of a liaison between the trainees in pediatrics and the
Mm.
leadership and administrative and faculty group in pediatrics.
Yeah.
And peeking a little bit behind the curtain made me realize, wow, all these people that are working so hard for us as learners are also sort of going to meetings and improving the
Mm.
hospital and improving the way we take care of patients. And that was really exciting to me. So I decided to stay here at Iowa and learn more about an academic career, and I haven't looked back. I've been here now my whole career. You're right, it's almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And again, I say regularly, I don't have the perfect job.
Well, I love that story, and there's so many things that stand out to me. So, the first thing that I just wanted to touch on a little bit is, not having someone in your family who's a medical background. And I hear that a lot from students. Like, are you
Mhm.
sure that there's a place for me? Nobody in my family is a doctor. Sometimes it's no one in my family even went to college. Like, how can I even think about doing this thing that seems so hard and so far away? And I bet just the fact that you mentioned that resonates with people who might be listening and thinking they don't belong because absolutely there's a place for everyone in medicine, or there should be.
Yes, I agree. There should be a place for everyone. And in fact, I think the gifts that we bring to the table, where maybe we walk in having a little bit of a different perspective, maybe understanding how scary it is to come to a big hospital. I'm from a rural background and I went to a doctor when I was either bleeding or, when I needed a sports physical, and I think way back then it was once in my entire high school job, and then I think I went to a doctor once in college.
Yeah.
So, I would not
Put a
recommend that,
band-aid
but
on it, you'll be fine, right? Yeah.
yes, and I think, and I also, when I first started in my career, I also served on the College of Medicine admissions committee,
Hmm.
and that was deliberate, part because I wanted to be able to ensure as best I could that people like me, people who maybe had a different background or who had to maybe work a little bit harder to figure out the path, to figure out how to study, to get those resources. Again, I think we can bring a lot to the table, and I completely agree. Take the step or ask the questions. There's a lot of us out there who were walked your path in the past, and I think we can help each other out. And then you can pass it on, pass it forward to the next person.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that you mentioned that, resonated with me is it really sounded like you kind of found your people and sort of and in doing so, recognizing the people that you wanted to help and support, whether it's other women in medicine or your patients and, moms and young kids. And so was there someone in your career that you can point to that say, wow, this person was a great mentor that really helped me get to where I'm gonna be? And how did that help you? And how did you find them?
Oh, I think that's such a great question. And, I would say that instead of saying one person, I'm going to say a handful of people. And I include you, Ben, in that group of people
That's great.
because I think, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here. I don't know that I ever identified one person. I was always on the lookout for people that I wanted to work with.
Hmm.
And I really found that, I love the patients I work with. But one of the key things, which I think I discovered over time in my career, was that I wanted to work with the people in pediatrics,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
physicians, the nurses, the pharmacists. There is a certain group of people who want to take care of children. We are advocates. We are looking to guide families and patients on this difficult journey. And I would argue in a lot of cases, probably myself included, the health of my children is of utmost importance to me. Parents will do anything for their kids. And I think pediatrics healthcare in general is optimistic. We have a tendency to think to make things better.
Yeah.
And when we can't, we also then bring the family along to ease their journey a little bit. And so I think that's the kind of people I want to be around. And I feel really lucky that I'm in a job where everybody around me is always learning and striving.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing about medicine that I maybe didn't think about beforehand is we're professionals and certainly we're highly regarded as a profession, but we're also surrounded daily by people who are striving and learning and growing and asking each other questions. And that's an environment that's very positive to, it's not just a job then, it's really you go in knowing you're going to learn something every day. And I think that that has spurred my lifelong learning and in other topics as well. It's not just medicine that I sort of dive in and learn. And, their medical education is the same way. This is a field that is growing and developing and changing on a constant basis. And the healthcare professions are changing dramatically since you and I were trainees.
Yeah.
And so that kind of environment, I think, is over and above the medical and research changes that are happening continuously. And that's exciting. And I think it keeps our jobs fulfilling at the same time, and we can continue to grow.
Yeah, keeps the tank full for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, many people just think of a physician as someone in a white coat who's in a clinic and seeing patients, and that's the only side of medicine you see. And people, the public, people who don't work in healthcare don't see sort of that striving and sort of the lifelong learning that occurs. And I wanted to kind of pivot from that a little bit and focusing on the lifelong learning and kind of your roles in particular. I think sometimes people think that, oh, I'm good at science, I'm smart, I'm good in school, I'm just naturally going to be a leader.
Mm.
And sometimes people will look to you as someone who gets good grades as the person who should be a leader and be able to do it. But leadership is really something that you learn, and leadership skills are things that you develop over time. So I know that I've certainly stepped in at my fair share of times, and I was trying to be a leader and did it wrong. Like what lessons have you taken from your career, and what have you learned about leadership that you didn't know when you first started?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I have stepped in it a lot too. I mean, I think first of all, you're absolutely right. Leadership is something that you are not automatically you don't automatically know how to do it. And I think it's a continuous learning process too. I also think it's one of those things that just because somebody is really good at science or really gets really great grades, they are not necessarily great leaders. Leadership can come in a lot of different flavors. But I think about it in terms of helping guide someone or some project with your expertise, with your care, with your attention to make it a little bit better. And that can be a variety of different ways and different things. I think probably I had some skills to begin with. I really like diving in and fixing things. When I see challenge or I see I'm in a meeting and I talk to people and I think, wow, I could help with that. Why is nobody else helping?
Mhm.
Often I will get myself into trouble and dive in and help. And I think to a certain extent, at first in my job, I was not strategic in what I said yes to. I just was excited to be a part of a whole bunch of different things and meeting a whole bunch of different people. And I admit I wanted the variety in my job. I didn't want to practice clinical medicine only. I wanted a variety. So that's something that I learned over time as I became a lot more strategic. I've had a lot of opportunities to do a variety of different things.
Mhm.
And I would say initially saying yes is really good because
Yep.
I met a ton of great people. I met people who I would never end up working with otherwise in different surgical
Mhm.
fields, IT specialists, pathologists. But over time, I think you can only say yes and do so many things really, really well. And so as you experience those things, and you step up a little bit, being able to hone in on what is it that truly drives you. And for me, those situations sort of came to a head with medical education. The other thing I think I'm still working on to this day is I am relatively impatient. And so and that's my husband would and my daughters would tell you that for sure. I think initially when I started in projects, I just dove in and I was like, why are you guys not doing this at the same speed that I am? And why are we not making progress? And why are we not doing things? And I don't know that I've gotten more patient, unfortunately, but I think I have gotten more realistic. And I
Mhm.
also, as you step into further and further leadership roles where you're covering more and more projects and topics, you realize that it is much more complicated than you ever imagined.
Yep.
There are, especially at a place like the University of Iowa, our healthcare system is so complex, and a small change in one unit can impact a variety of different things across the board. And you have to think about money. And you have to think about, certainly we always put patients as at the forefront, but you have to think about all the other people that are impacted when you make a change. And I think I've made a lot of mistakes that way too. I'm better at it now. I would say my impatience has also in some ways benefited me because I'm somebody who gets stuff done. And sometimes being the driver of projects, even if it's just you by yourself, can really put a face and an urgency to projects and get things going and make positive things happen for you when you're really passionate about it.
Yeah, that's so well said. And how do you, thinking about the people who are thinking of leadership positions, and I know I'm certainly impatient and sometimes tend to be decisive. Like I try to make quick decisions just because I
Mhm.
think things need to get done. And, I've learned that that's probably not the best approach all the time, right? So I'm curious, how do you balance that impatience and that kind of change-making desire with being just open and supportive? Do you have a trick that you use internally that says, all right, I need to slow down? Like any tips or tricks that you can share with people that have similar approaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think naturally I'm a relational leader. My favorite way of being a leader is knowing everybody and being able to sit down across from them and know who they are and what drives them, and then hear their story and help tailor how
Mm,
I can help with what they need. That is harder and harder the bigger your team gets.
yes.
With the role that I'm in right now that I took over about 6 months ago, leading all of graduate medical education, that's almost 1,000 learners, and, it's 50 some program directors, and it's covers every department. There's no way that I can learn the individual stories of everybody, but so I think that's a natural part of just sort of my personality. How I can pause before making a quick decision is actually something. So one of my idols is Abraham Lincoln. I
Mm,
probably for a lot of people, and I read several books about him, and one of the things that I learned about him is he has what I call the Lincoln letter. And
no,
that is something I did. Maybe I've told you this story,
no,
but
I
I'll
love
tell the
this
listeners.
already. Yes.
Is that he when he died, he had that kinda top hat, and when his hat came off, they actually found letters in his hat, and then they also found them in his desk when they were going through his stuff, and what they were letters that he had written to people that he was in charge of, and they were very clearly letters he had written in a strong emotional state, whether it was negative or anxious or angry or, excited. He saved them. So he paused when he had a big feeling and he was ready to make a decision, but he knew how important it was. He wrote it down and then he put it away. And the Lincoln letter thing is something that I've used since I read about that and I really incorporated it. And I think that has helped me to pause when I'm either feeling strongly about something or impatient about something or frankly angry or anxious about something.
Yeah.
What I will do is pause. I'll write it down, I'll write the email, and then I'll stop and I'll wait 12 to 24 hours. And then usually when I come back, I'm in a better state and something has settled out that has made it clearer in how I should respond. And again, I think if we all did that, I think society would be better.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know that I am always successful, but I try to do that.
That's a great, great tip. I think there's something powerful in just writing something down because you have to filter your thoughts already. And as long as you don't hit the send button, which I'm afraid to admit that I had done one or two times, so I wish I wouldn't have, but
Yep.
what a great way to frame your thoughts and
Yeah.
also honor. I mean, in some ways, anger and excitement and frustration, those are
Yep.
all very valid and
Yes.
sometimes moral reactions to hard things. And so honoring that emotion is also really important for, I think, health as a leader, right?
I love how you phrase that. Honoring our feelings and our emotions makes us human and makes us good doctors and good people. And sometimes anger is valid
Yeah.
and it can motivate us to take that next step. And other times expressing anger over email or on the phone is just can harm sort of everybody including you. And so having a measured response, even if that response expresses those feelings is really a smart thing for a leader.
Huge. Yeah. So I want to pivot a little bit from those leadership lessons to something that you mentioned earlier, which is what it's like to be a medical educator. So, many people think that I talk to students all the time who are like, I want to do medical education, I want to teach. But really what they mean is they want to work with learners and work in an environment where there's learning happening, but miss what medical education really is. So you touched on kind behind the curtain kind of thing. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what's the day to day of a program director really look like?
Oh, happy to. So first of all, it's a lot of meetings. I'll just put that out there. I'm in a lot of meetings, and that's okay. I think they're getting smart people. Again, this goes back to being surrounded by smart people that are engaged and excited when you're in a lot of meetings is really important. Anybody in medicine can be an educator and a teacher, and that can be teaching your patients and families. I think, doctor and teacher are so closely linked that you can be a teacher if that's what you're passionate about in medicine. Find a way to do that with families and patients at the very beginning. You can also teach your peers, even if you're in private rural practice. Teaching your peers or teaching the community is a great way to do that.
Hmm.
I was really drawn to the academic medical environment,
Yeah.
even as a generalist, which is a little bit less common than a subspecialist like you. An academic environment, what that is there's all of us together, and we actually teach medical students and residents and fellows and peers in a sort of central environment. And that's what drives me. There's also more time and room to build programs, to build education, to build curricula. When I first started out, I thought my goal was going to be that sort of face to face teaching and clinical teaching because I had mentors like you who were so good at it. I realized when I did my master's degree, which I pursued primarily because I wanted to get better at it. My mom is a teacher and my husband is a teacher. And if I learned anything from those two loved ones, it's that you don't know how to teach something just because you know how to do it. You really need that practice and that deliberate training to learn how to be a great teacher. And so I knew that I needed that. And while I was in my master's program, I realized that while I liked the face to face teaching, I really loved the curriculum development.
Hmm.
Finding out, going and talking to learners and programs and saying, what do you need? And then stepping back, building things, creating things, finding experts, putting it into a digestible format that people can respond to, and then sending it back out in the world and finding out how's it going. Looking back and saying, did that work? Did you learn what I needed to? Did you find engagement? I think one of the lessons I've learned, and this has been embarrassingly late in my career, is that we as teachers, we need to deliberately reflect on how we learn
Oh.
and what works for us. So
Hmm.
I learn best by having a really smart person next to me, walk me through something, show me something, make it an engaging learning environment where I feel comfortable asking questions, and then following up with me and saying, did that go well? How did it go? That's sort of how I teach. But I think sometimes we as medical educators, we think it's all a lecture or a PowerPoint or a
Yeah.
packet or a test. And it doesn't have to be that way. On the flip side, we also have to think about what kind of teacher the learners need because sometimes they need a lecture or they need me to really probe them or they're not going to feel challenged enough. And so it's a lot of self-reflection as a medical educator too.
Yeah, like, gosh, so many great things in that again as well. I mean, I think when people think about teaching and learning, we think they probably think about their own experience in elementary school or junior high or high school, but how we learn and teach both changes as we age, right? And so adult learners learn differently than younger learners, and I suspect medical students when they enter medical school learn very differently, that phase in their career than they do when they're residents or fellows. And so we need people like you who understand sort of the science and the what's, where, whys, and hows of education to build those educational programs.
I agree with you completely. I think about the way we are asked to perform in college and in medical school, especially when we have goals. Maybe you're in college and you want to go to medical school. Grades matter, and whether we like it or not, they do. And test scores matter. Yes, they do. You have to do well on tests. And that's important because we owe it to our patients. There's nothing more important. You got to know your stuff, right? They trust us. And then there's this switch that happens the day you start residency. And I was a program director in peds for 12 years. And I told our residents this the first day during orientation. I said, it's different now. We want you to ask questions. We want you to not know and admit it and be vulnerable and be humble about your knowledge gaps because you're now standing there with a patient and it's your responsibility. And you have to walk into that with this profound sense of humility and
Yeah.
honor. And it's not about proving yourself, because at the end of the day, it's a signature that says you're ready to go. And that signature is hours and hours of patient care and of asking the questions and diving into the books and learning on the internet and looking up individual things and being on call. And that's what being a doctor is about. Now, if only we could fit that in a little earlier so that that fun part was more integrated into medical school. I think they're doing a better job of that in medical education at
Yeah,
the med school level than
agreed.
when maybe you and I were there.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, especially
Yeah.
for those of us that learn by doing, right? And
Yeah.
so, we've talked a little bit about graduate medical education, residency, and fellowship, and people listening may not actually know what that is. Like my mom may be the only one listening to this podcast, right? And so she still
Hi,
probably
mom.
doesn't know
Nice
what
job.
she doesn't know what graduate medical education is. So how would
Yeah.
you define that just to people
Yeah.
listening?
So, for those people who don't know the sort of standard path for a physician, just briefly, physicians go to, at least US trained physicians, go to 4 years of college, and then they go to 4 years of medical school. And that's where they learn the basics and they practice the biochemistry and they do anatomy classes and they figure out what kind of doctor they want to be. And then at the end of medical school, the vast majority of physicians then go on to what's called a residency. And that is where you decide what kind of field, what kind of doctor you want to be. So there are pediatricians, which is by far the best kind.
Yeah.
And then there's
Without
surgeons and there's eye doctors and there's adult doctors and there's women's doctors. And that residency can be anywhere from 3 years to up to 7 years for something like neurosurgery. After residency, you are ready to, in most cases, be board eligible in a field. And that means you take a big, scary test, and then you get certified to practice pediatrics like we do. For someone like you then who wants to do more specialized care, then there's a fellowship. And that can be anywhere from 1 to sometimes many years, 5, 6 years,
Mhm.
where you get specialized training and then can get to take another big test. And then you can become a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist or a specialized surgeon. Graduate medical education is those residencies and those fellowships where people have graduated from medical school and are moving on to the specialty of their choice. So here at the University of Iowa Healthcare, we have over 100 residencies and fellowships. We have about almost 1,000 learners. They're all people who have medical training and then have come here to get specialized departmental training in the field that they're interested in. So it is a very diverse group of people from all different age groups,
Yep.
men and women. People from all over the world come here to get world-class training. And there are people who primarily spend time in a dark room looking at x-rays.
Yep.
And there are people who spend the primary amount of time in the community doing family medicine. And then there are people who spend most of their time in the OR doing complex brain surgeries. We have all of those. And graduate medical education encompasses those by looking at curricula and looking at experiences and looking at the
Mhm.
training environment to make sure that we're treating doctors humanely
Yeah.
and that we're ensuring and we are responsible for making sure that at the end of the day, they're ready to go out into the world and practice independently.
That's a nice summary of a really big and complex topic. And so,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really unique is we're graduate medical education and residency and fellowship directors and people who teach residents and fellows are responsible for making sure the residents, you know, have the knowledge they need. They also need the skills that they are required to function in the healthcare system. We're also actually responsible and feel responsible and I think duty bound for their well being during this really difficult time in their life, which I think is unique, right? So that doesn't happen for people who get high powered lawyer jobs like right
Mhm.
out of law school. And so, can you talk a little bit about what you do as an educator and now as a leader in GE to make sure that residents and fellows are just healthy and well when they start and when they leave?
Oh, that's a great question, and just as complicated as some of the other things we've talked about. I think you're right. We have to teach skills and we have to teach knowledge. But I think one of the other things, the profound things that happens during graduate medical education training is professional development. And I think I'll start with that part of it because the step going from being a trainee to being an independent doctor is a long step, and it's interesting how it develops. And I find that just fascinating because, again, the public and patients put such trust in us. We have to have a very high bar for being responsible for our documentation and for the working conditions. We have to be very thoughtful about the style of communication that we have, and that we are compassionate but also objective. And it's a professional journey. It's hard to put your fingers on it, and it's interesting how it happens. We also, the moment you walk in the door, people look at you in the as a doctor, as a leader. You can be the youngest, most junior person in the room, but if you're the only physician, people will listen to you. How you manage that responsibility is very important. And I think so that professional development, I think, goes hand in hand with your question about well-being.
Mhm.
I am confident, if you've read some of the books like House of God from long, long ago,
Yes.
that medical trainees were not treated humanely or compassionately. There was this idea that if you just spent a huge amount of time in the hospital with patients constantly, 24/7, and that you would somehow emerge after a set period of time as a doctor who was ready to go. We know that's wrong. We also know from a lot of studies that that's unsafe.
Yes.
And so since then, we've slowly and gradually made progress to look at let's look at what you're actually doing, and let's evaluate what you're doing and how you're approaching it and how you're learning and responding to feedback. And well-being was a component of that when doctors were
Mhm.
working such long hours, or, many women weren't able to have children during training because they had no time off to have kids. And men certainly couldn't take time off to be with their families because they were always in the hospital too. We have an obligation to make sure that the people who walk out as physicians caring for other people also care for themselves, and it has been a journey for sure. We're still working on it. In terms of the best way to do that, I think there are rules in place now that weren't in place before, in terms of you must be able to take time off for family emergencies, for medical care, for vacation, for God's sake. You must also have the ability to rest during being on call, and you must have food, and you must be able to breastfeed if you're a lactating mother. And these are important. You must learn about what happens to your body and your decision making when you're fatigued. These were things we didn't talk about 20 years ago. But then there's so many intangible things about well-being too, and you and I have talked about this at length as we try to figure out the best way to help all of our learners thrive in medicine, because everybody's a little different. I used to run a lot to keep
Mhm.
my well-being good. That was sort of how I process things, and now I tend to read. Those are the things I do to sort of decompress. Some people really wanna go out and go to out for dinner with friends, or
Mhm.
be in a loud environment, or travel. Other people, they wanna be with their family. They need more time with their kids or with their loved ones, or they, wanna walk their dog. Everybody has a different version of well-being, both outside the hospital and
Mhm.
then also inside the hospital. And I think that's a key thing too, that going back to the professional development, I think we need to find ways of being well inside the hospital and inside our job so that we can maintain the long hours and the hard work that we do.
Absolutely. Medicine is hard, and we can't take the hard away, right? You can't take the challenging away, and I think most of us wouldn't want it to go away, to be quite honest. But
I
it
agree.
needs sustainable, and figuring out how you can make it sustainable is really a challenge that probably all of us have struggled with at some point or another.
Absolutely. And I've learned too that it looks so different for all of us, right? I think one of the things that's really good for me is having a variety in my day to day. I really like, as a professional well-being component.
Yep.
I really like being able to go to some meetings, having some time to work at my desk, having groups of people that I get to meet with and collaborate with. But I also really love patient care, and my administrative roles have over time gotten to the point where people actually wanted me to step away from patient care, and I realized that my well-being suffered because
Mm.
of it. I really needed to be with patients, And so I actually adjusted my schedule accordingly, and it was good for me. And I think people need to think about that. I've encouraged learners over and over again when they talk about well-being to not just think about how does your well-being thrive on the outside the hospital when you're not working, but also what do you do here? How can you spend some of your day doing the things that you love? Because that will impact your well-being as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick fact, I think there's great research that says if people spend just 20% of their time doing something they love, the other 80% can be filled with things that are less fulfilling, but it gets you through, right? And so it goes back to being able to see patients if you want, or having time to read, or whatever it is that fills your cup. It's so important. Yeah.
I agree. And I think this goes back to over time realizing how important it is that the colleagues I work with are good people too. I'm in meetings all the time, and that's true. And I love the people I work with. Getting to sit down with a group of people that I like and fix problems is really rewarding. And mentoring junior residents and medical students and even peers that I like to be around, that I learn from every day as well, is a really positive way to bring well-being into the workplace and not just sort of need to get out of the workplace in
Yeah.
order to be okay.
Absolutely. First, I want to thank you for your time here. You've covered a lot of really big stuff, and I want to close with just a couple questions. So the first one is a little more personal. I mean, I know that you've raised two daughters who are now young
Mhm.
women and just early and kind of figuring out themselves and what they want to do. What do you hope that they take from your career and watching how you've navigated your career and your leadership positions in medicine? And what do you hope they take from that?
I've been very thoughtful about that. It is not easy to have children
Oh,
as a physician. I am very lucky to have a supportive partner who is my biggest fan, and he's a teacher, but also has a graduate degree, and so has his own career that's important to him. And I've actually been I had both of my daughters when I was in training, and sent them to daycare at 6 weeks because I had to come back to work. And that's hard. It's hard on your heart,
hmm.
and I can't think of a person who doesn't worry that there's gonna be a negative impact on everybody, on everything. They're 18 and 20 now, and they're beautiful, smart, kind, generous women who will likely pursue a STEM field, possibly even medicine. And I've talked to them about this, and I think one of the things that I think was I always talked to them. We prioritized them, so we were homebodies and we stayed at home a lot, and I hung out with them a lot, but I also talked to them about what I was doing when I came to work. And I talked to them, developmentally appropriately about I'm helping other kids. There's sick kids at the hospital, or I have to go because this patient in the clinic needs me.
Hmm.
And they understand that even from an early age. And they also recognize deliberate practice that I have when I say I'm going to work with this colleague. I'm learning from them. They're teaching me a lot. Or this conference that I went to really excited me because I was able to do the next thing. And again, both of them, I actually asked one of my daughters who is still home from college what she thought that I had taught her over time, and she said that the importance of being around good people that you wanna learn from and grow with is crucial, and so that was one of the reasons that she was excited to consider it a career in medicine where she got to work with smart people every single day. I hope these lessons stick. There at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than the people you come home to, and there are sacrifices in medicine, and sometimes those trade-offs can be okay in the long run if you're deliberate.
Well said. Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices, and sometimes I think we focus on the sacrifices that our families make or that we make for our jobs, but there are also some gifts in there. And I like how you highlighted the gifts that kind of are that you received, but also that your maybe hopefully your family and your kids received.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I like to end with is, there's if you look in the headlines and in the world, there's just a lot of things to be frustrated about, I think. And
Yeah.
I like to focus on what's one thing you're looking forward to? What's one thing you're excited about in the coming months ahead that you're like, oh, this is getting me through the hard days?
Oh, well, there's so many things that are in the real world that I'm looking forward to, but I'll say one thing in graduate medical education we touched on already that I am
Mhm.
so excited about is the progress we have made as an institution, but also as a community in medicine on well-being. People are paying attention to it now, and this is something, as you know, Ben, that I've been working on for a long
Long.
time, and I have not been able to make the traction or advocate as effectively as I had hoped for a long time. And because I think that there were many people who grew up in the system that was a little less humane and didn't focus on this as much. And they think, well, if I did it, I'm fine. You guys can do it too. And if you don't go through the hard stuff, how will you be a good doctor? Well, we know that's false. Now I think we're finally getting to the point where people are saying our trainees and our doctors as a profession are at risk. We
Uh-huh.
work really hard. We deal with really complex moral questions and emotions and feelings like we talked about that are important, and that in order for us to give the best that we can to patients and families, which is what we owe them, we must be able to take care of ourselves. We must be able to take a sick day every once in a while or have the resources to be able to make our working environment humane and safe and make it possible for us to go home at the end of the day and not have 50 charts or 17 phone calls to make.
Uh-huh.
We need that. And I am so excited that the progress that's been made here at UI Healthcare to move that needle, to ask the trainees, what do you need right now? What they need right now is different probably than what you and I needed 20 years ago. The world has changed.
Yep.
And we should be paying attention to that. We should be asking and treating each other like colleagues and humans makes all of us do better. And in the end, what matters is how we treat our patients.
Yep.
And I think you and I probably know that at the end of a 30-hour PICU shift, we were not at our best.
No.
And yet we still took good care of patients, but we don't need to make our colleagues do that. What we can do is find a better way. And we are at the cusp of really diving in and improving the well-being programming for medical students, for residents and fellows, and I hope for faculty, colleagues, and for each other, so that the system gets a little bit better. And so I remain very optimistic about this, and I know that there are really smart people working on this question.
Oh gosh, I love that you mentioned that. I mean, the healthcare system just seems so big and so complex, and I think people think I either need to put up or shut up essentially and just deal with it. And it's nice to know that there is change that happening. It just sometimes happens slowly or at a pace that it's hard to notice. But
Yeah.
the generational change, I think, will really be seismic as this next generation of
Mhm.
leaders kind of take over our jobs, right, and kind of assume leadership positions. And I'm excited for what may come as a result of the investment that's made in their well being now.
Me too. And I think I am excited that learners now can walk in and see people like you talking about this because I don't know that we had that. And so the more we're talking about it and realizing that there are leaders like you and me in positions where we can make that change that are thinking about this, the better it is for the people walking in. I think it is still the best job in the world. It's hard. It's still the best job in the world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Amy, so sharing your expertise with us and a little bit of your heart and life as well. And so, for people who want to know a little bit more about Dr. Stier's work, we'll include some links to her bio in the show notes. And I also work at the University of Iowa. It's a great place to train. I don't think we're just blowing smoke here. So, if you're a trainee or someone who's looking for a humane yet excellent place to train, check out the programs at the University of Iowa. You won't be disappointed, and we'd love to have you.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thanks, Amy.